Welcome to the Unbroken Arrows Healing Through the Hunt podcast. I'm Greg, and my son Trey is here with me, and we are at the 2024 National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, and we're honored to have a guest this episode by the name of Tony Jones. And Tony is also known as the Reverend Hunter, but on his Instagram page, his profile describes himself as an outdoorsman, a writer, and a theologian. So Tony, welcome to the Unbroken Arrows podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here, guys.
Oh, awesome. We're happy that we could make the connection. One of the things that you're doing here at the Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, you are presenting. And the title to what you are presenting is called Finding Friends to Hunt With and Land to Hunt. So if you would, please tell us a little bit about that talk and discussion that you are presenting here.
Yeah. Well, we can go a little bit into my backstory in a minute if you're interested, but I'll tell you the nuts and bolts of the talk is just that, there are a lot of us who love to hunt but don't own land, and I'm all for public land. I'm a big supporter of public land. I'm a member of Pheasants Forever and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and I've gone to my state legislature and lobbied on behalf of public land. But also, frankly, there's a lot of great hunting on private land. So my talk this weekend has been about how you build relationships with landowners and find places to hunt on private land. And for those of us who, there's kind of a stereotype out there that you got to pay $250 per gun per day to get on private land in South Dakota, and surely there's truth to that, especially early season. And I think some landowners count that as a source of revenue.
Sure.
Some landowners are probably a little greedy about that or whatever, but I've been hunting private land in South Dakota for 15 years, and I've never paid, not once. I've just developed relationships with landowners, and I pay in other ways. I help them. I come out in the spring and help them plant tree belts. I've come out here with a chainsaw and walk through old established tree belts and cut branches off of Russian olive trees so that we can make send a hunter and a dog into the tree belt in the fall. So there's a lot of different. It's like I've sent flowers to landowners before because I've had a buddy say, "Oh, I think she'd really like a Christmas centerpiece because we just shot a lot of pheasants in her slough and we've never hunted that before." And so I told the story of that during the talk and how I then gathered money from the fellas and sent some flowers to this lady, and she really appreciated it. So I think there are ways you can do it, and I'm trying to break that myth that that pheasant hunting private land in South Dakota has become a big money affair for rich guys only, and that's not the case.
Sure. And we'll probably come back to this, circle back around this, and you talked about your backstory, but one of the things that I wanted to, share with you is we corresponded a little bit before this, and you know that I'm a former teacher, retired teacher and principal. And one of the things that you mentioned that is the heart of my philosophy of working with students, parents, guardians, is that it is all about relationships. And that's so very, very important. A landowner, that's their land.
Yeah.
And they can say yes, no, and do whatever it is that they want to do with their land. But if you do the due diligence to develop a relationship, even if it doesn't end up to be something that you can land that you can hunt on, you're also developing a relationship with another human being, and that in itself is worthwhile too.
Yeah, and I started my career as a youth pastor, so not that different from what you were doing.
Sure.
Working with adolescents, and when you're a senior pastor, you spend a lot of time going to committee meetings and balancing the budget and preparing sermons and going to a lot of meetings. Youth pastors are kind of exempt from some of that, and at least my senior pastor when I was a youth pastor way back in the day said, your job is to just make relationships with kids. So just go do it. And kind of like, I got your back on all this other, I don't want you in the office. He's like, I don't want to see you in a necktie on Sunday morning. Like, I love this. I remember vividly, like where we were standing in the church. He said, I want the kids really to like you, and I want the parents to like you, but I want the parents to fear you a little bit too. Like maybe you're teaching their kids something that's maybe a little subversive and radical, like, of course, the gospel. I mean, this is my perspective on the gospel, that it's quite a subversive message, a countercultural message. So stuff like that. It was, and then you're exactly right. It all comes down to relationships.
Right. Your website is, first I'm going to say, beautiful. The photography.
Well, my wife's a professional photographer.
Okay,
that comes in handy a lot. I have the best headshot. I mean, maybe nobody buys my book, but I got a great headshot on the back cover.
You're right. But as an outdoorsman, what are the types of things that are you? What fills your bucket in terms of being that outdoorsman? Yeah.
I'm a generalist for sure. I do a lot of different things. But top of that pyramid is pheasant hunting. I'm crazy about it. Like I dream about it at night during the off season. I could tell you guys about the last rooster I shot this last season that just ended. Like I will remember that shot for the rest of the year. And it will like keep my head in the game. Sometimes I think it's like guys who are really into golf. Sure. That's that one great shot.
I'm one of those guys.
Are you one of those guys? And is it like that one great shot that brings you back?
Yep.
Well, that's
you
how it
look
is.
for it every time you go out, but you never find it again. It seems like.
Yeah. I mean, it's that way.
When you're with me, at least.
Well, and it's probably the same because you go back, play the same golf course. Like I go back to the same field, and I'll be like, "Man, last time there were a bunch of pheasants right there," and we'll go there, and it's just like. Nothing.
Yep.
And then you see a coyote run out the side. You're like, oh, that's why there's no pheasants there or whatever. Right? But I deer hunt. I don't love it. I primarily do it for the meat. My wife and I, we just became empty nesters. Our youngest kid just left for college, and our goal is to be totally wild game. Like we're gonna not buy any meat. But we're not there yet. I need to shoot more than one deer a year to make that happen.
That takes time, right?
And it takes time. Yeah. It takes time. And of course, once all your kids leave the house, you have more time. I mean, I have a lot more time than I used to. And boy, the house is just blissfully quiet. I will tell you that.
Right.
Some parents love it. Some parents hate it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have friends who are my same age who are really struggling with that. But no, my wife has no kids. That's part of my story too. Is I'm married a second time. But and I fish. I will. This last thing I'll say is that I've had people tell me for years, "Oh, you're so into hunting. You got to bow hunt. It's gonna change your life." And then all my angler friends are like, "Fly fishing.
Right.
And once you fly fish, you'll never bait cast again." And I'm like, "You guys, I'm spread so thin already, and I don't have the money to start two new expensive hobbies. I'll do it once my kids are all gone." And now my kids are all gone, and so like I got to put my money where my mouth is. Luckily. 3 different people have given me fly rods, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So now I'm just putting it out there to all your listeners, and that the universe will bring me a compound bow. Yeah. I'm sure somebody will send me a compound bow.
That's a good way to go about it.
It's got to happen, right?
Right. On your Instagram, and I think, and also on your website, you talk about pursuing meaning in the outdoors, and our Unbroken Arrows, Healing Through the Hunt, is very similar in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Again, our listeners know a little bit about our story, but what about yours?
Yeah, I know. I listened to your first episode where you guys talked about your story and laid that out, and I felt a lot of parallels. My life was kind of clicking along like it should have, and everything seemed to be going well. And it all fell apart around the age of 40. I got divorced. It was a brutal, brutal marriage that took a huge toll on me. And then the divorce, like getting out of a bad marriage, is even worse. Not even worse, because you're finally out. But it that almost killed me. And then a few years after that, I decided to go for full custody of my kids, which I got. But that process also is a brutal process.
Sure it is.
And it's not easy for dads. It's a really, really tall hill to climb. And so through those years of like 40 to 45, I got foreclosed on. I lost everything. You know, I lost my career because when you go through the kind of things I go through, you know, the church is great for hurting people, not so great for hurting pastors.
Okay.
That's been my experience, at least. Hunting was the thing. Hunting was the thing that became my like spiritual home. And when I got out hunting, not only did I feel connected with God in the wilderness and in nature, but I have this incredible bond with my dog, you know. And frankly, the guys I hunted with, they did not care. They did not care about what was going on back at home. They cared for me,
right?
But they were like, hey, look, the bar was pretty low. They were like, this guy's a safe hunter. He's got a good dog, and he buys a round of beer at the bar at the end of the night. Yeah, like that's all we really expect. It's and that was so refreshing to have people who cared for me, but didn't want to rehash all the dirt and dirty laundry that was a part of my life. Yeah. So there were all these multiple streams of being outdoors and hunting. And then another thing I do a lot is that I go to the Boundary Waters. And now I lead canoe trips for pastors in the Boundary Waters. And, pastors are notoriously bad at taking care of themselves, at having boundaries and putting their phones away.
Right.
So to take pastors into the Boundary Waters where their phones don't even work, Right. And they love it. They love it. It's hard for them to get away, but when they do, it's very healing.
Right. And I've shared with you, I'm Catholic, and we have a family cabin in north of Park Rapids, Minnesota, which is right 3 miles from Itasca State Park, the source of the Mississippi River. Yeah. And there's a little church there that I think the total number of parishioners are 2. And a few years back, they came up with this idea of a vacation package for priests, just so they could say Mass there. And that was something that the people that stayed at Itasca State Park, they were asking for. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to give somebody that, whether a pastor, a priest, a minister, that's a high-stress job. And they need time to unwind as well. So when you talk about being able to get into the outdoors and taking those canoeing and decompressing, that's a tremendous service. That's a tremendous opportunity for them. So
yeah, you can almost see there's anxiety when we're standing at the edge of the lake about to push those canoes in and take off. And, a lot. I think every single one of them, if I said, when was the last time you had no cell coverage for 6 days? They'd be like, I can't even remember. Like, right. When I got my first cell phone, 6
days before I got my phone.
Yeah, exactly. Like 20 years ago or whatever it was. I'm like, well, you can use them to take pictures, I guess, but once we start paddling, it's going to go from 5 bars down to no bars. Mm-hmm. And you watch the anxiety first build and then melt away. Yeah. And I, the same thing happens to me on a hunt. In fact, I've started to think, it used to be like, oh, the drive from Minneapolis to central South Dakota, what a grind. We get up at 5 a.m, and so we can be boots on the ground at 10, right when,
that's the best part.
Yeah, legal shooting starts. And I'm like, now I think of the drive as like a pilgrimage.
Sure.
Uh-huh.
Where you're letting that stuff fall away, and you're talking to your hunting buddy you haven't seen in 9 months, right. And the dogs are asleep in the back, and it's that becomes part of the process too, part of the journey.
Yeah, it's all
too.
part of it. That's one of my favorite things, like on a trip like that, is the drive there. Yeah, like you got to take that in. If you don't take that in, you're gonna miss.
But
out
I think
on
you're
half.
right. I think. Sorry, I keep. You got to be conscious about it. You got to be like so many things in the spiritual life, whether you're a traditionally religious person or not. I don't think it really matters so much in this aspect, is that it's the consciousness of the act. Like any spiritual practice, whether it's a traditional prayer, like say you're making the Stations of the Cross on Good Friday if you're Catholic, or say if you're somebody out on a canoe trip, if you're not conscious about it, if you're just going through the motions, it doesn't matter how religious or non-religious it is. But if you're conscious about it, like about the drive, you're like, I'm not going to be angry during this drive that it's so long or whatever. I'm going to be like, no, this is part of my journey. I'm going to like leave. Somebody taught me years ago, and I've done it many times now since. They're like, when you're about 2 blocks away from home, stop your truck and just open the driver's door and just pretend like all your cares and worries of your city life are pouring out of the truck into the gutter and down the drain.
Right.
And so again, that's just like, it's just another thing of being conscious and deliberate about it in the process.
Sure. Trey and I were just talking about that too, the trips to our family cabin in Minnesota. When I was a young man, those were stressful trips. Those, you have to do all the packing and all those other kinds of things. And then as time went by, sometimes it was just trips with me and the kids. And it was less stressful. But, Trey would tell you that that's where he was introduced to Gordon Lightfoot, because Dad was listening to Gordon Lightfoot. And
like that, I feel so blessed to be so. I was like 6 or 7, and those are the times that I remember the most. I don't remember being in the cabin as much, but like on the way up, having 7 of us in the car.
Oh my gosh!
And listen, I know exactly what we listened to. And I can name 10 songs like.
Because those become rituals, right?
Yeah,
they become rituals in your life, and it's part of the genius of religion that it ritualizes aspects of our lives as human beings, and it makes us cognizant of the way that God is moving in the world. But it's not restricted to religion. Like we can ritualize other seemingly mundane aspects of our lives,
right?
And make them meaningful.
A sunrise.
That's right.
Yeah.
Again, being conscious about it or whatever. Yeah, and being like, I'm not just gonna walk by this sunrise. I'm gonna take it in. And yeah, that's right.
The sounds.
That's a trick I've made because I've had trips like weekend trips that fly by like that.
Yeah.
And I think being extra conscious about everything makes it last so much longer, mentally. But it makes it seem like it's lasting so much longer, and you enjoy so much more, and you remember so much more.
Yeah.
And that's something I take in everywhere I go.
Absolutely.
Even this weekend. But.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Tony, you are an accomplished author, and you have a new book coming out, The God of Wild Places. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my past books have all been. I have a PhD in theology. I've written several theological texts. I've written books on prayer and the Christian life and stuff like this. Youth ministry was my first couple books were about youth ministry. It's been a while since I wrote a book. My last book came out in 2015, so it's been a long time. This book is basically, for all intents and purposes, my memoir of how I survived the trauma of the personal stuff I've already talked about, and how the outdoors really ministered to me in the midst of that. And there are chapters. It's not like a memoir in that this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's a book that's thematic. So there's a chapter on finding peace. There's a chapter on the importance of place, about my lake cabin. Like you probably would be of your lake cabin. I've been going there since I was a kid. My grandpa bought it in 1964. Hand built the first cabin on that land.
Wow, does that sound familiar, Trey?
Yeah, right. And now I hunt that land, and I'm kind of the family caretaker of that land. So it's just like it's my spiritual home. But I also have chapters in there. It really stuff that I never heard preached about. And I never preached about, but now I realize how important it is, like the predator-prey relationship. Okay. Which is like, I just think the predator-prey relationship is just in our bones from our ancestors. And when you hunt, you're really in touch with that. But nobody ever preaches about that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
But it's like, it is every time we eat meat, frankly, every time we harvest a field, and eat grain or eat vegetables, we're part of this cycle of predator and prey, and ultimately we're each going to die, and we're going to be absorbed back into the earth, and then out of our humus will grow new things, and so I learned spiritual lessons in the outdoors that I did not learn in church. So part of the book is about that.
Sure. What you're describing is the circle of life.
Yeah.
And I know that just recently, I've always wanted to write, but more so along the lines of reflections and essays as opposed to a book. Children's book kind of have had my interest for a while. But I just posted a reflection on our Unbroken Arrows, Healing Through the Hunt website. And it's a reflection of faith, family, friends, football, and pheasants. And, it kind of goes through a cycle or a path for me in terms of where I was when I was young as opposed to where I am now. And even though there's no way to describe all the different turns that took place, but the most important thing, I think, and I think I hear you saying something similar, is finding a faith. Faith is so important. I don't care what denomination or religion you're talking about. You look at a sunrise, it's hard not to realize that there's a greater power, a sunset. Listening to the power behind the wind or the waves. Observing a squirrel. I don't really care what it is that you want to describe. I think it's easy to see in nature, in the outdoors, that there's a more powerful force there, and that's faith, and that's something that can grow. So.
Yeah, I think you're right.
No real question there, I guess,
no,
but I'm just kind of philosophizing.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think you're right. I mean, I do think that it's so funny. It just makes me think of like my publishing house, the publishing company that's publishing my book. They sent me some marketing copy that they were going to post online or whatever, and it was something like this. This is a memoir about a loss of faith. And I wrote them back, and I'm like, no, because of course, God bless them, but those marketing people, they don't read every book that they're marketing.
Right.
They can't possibly read every book that they're marketing. So I was like, actually, my book's not really about a loss of faith. It's about an evolution of my faith, or a turn in my faith, or a change in my faith, that I still have a faith. You might even call it a crisis of faith, but it's not a loss of faith. It's just a change of faith. And I think a lot of us, a lot of people, even people who stay inside of organized religion, their faith changes over time.
It's human.
On my podcast, I use a curse word. I won't, out of respect to your podcast, but crap happens in our lives, and it gives us a different perspective on, who God is and how God works in the world. When stuff goes south in your life, it does cause you to reflect and change your perspective. So I think you're right. I think faith is essential, and being open to how that, what you call it, God, you call it power, you call it nature, how that is working in your life. Again, back to being conscious of it, being like, are you open to the ways that you're learning and changing? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we can go back to what we started talking about with regard to relationships.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the basis behind it all, really. Yeah. And so, well, Tony, I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by and visit. I'd like to think that we might be able to be in contact down the road.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to purchasing your book and reading it.
Thank you.
And I think that pursuing the meaning of pursue the meaning of life in the outdoors
Yeah.
is such a very important thing to do for all of us.
Thanks.
And it doesn't have to be pheasant hunting.
No.
It could be taking a walk,
Yeah.
bird watching, heck, playing, pickleball.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I don't know about pickleball. I don't know about pickleball. Maybe golf, but I don't know about pickleball. Yeah,
Nothing more pretty than a golf course at 7 a.m., though, I'll tell you that.
That's true.
if I understand it, your book, The God of Wild Places, will be coming out in April. Is that correct?
That's right, even though I have a few copies here at Pheasant Fest.
Okay.
I'll get you one, but April 2 is the
Okay.
release date.
And if somebody's listening to our podcast and is interested in purchasing that book or any of your other materials that
Yeah.
you have already written, how do they do that?
godofwildplaces.com will take you to my website. That's the book, and you can link over to all the other books. But you can find the book there, hardcover, ebook, and an audiobook will all be out on April 2nd.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Love what you're doing. And I honestly think the future of hunting, frankly, is going to be more and more people who are interested in finding meaning in the hunt and healing in the hunt.
Well, thank you. Appreciate those words.
Yeah.
Thanks.